We're in John chapter 8, and we're looking at verses 31 to 41. This is about the Jews being the children of Abraham and what it really means to be a child of Abraham. Reading John 8:31. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples, and then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We're Abraham's descendants, and we've never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we should be set free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but the son belongs to it forever. And so, if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know you are Abraham's descendants, and yet you are ready to kill me because you have no room for my word. I am telling you what I have seen in my Father's presence, and you do what you've heard from your father." "Abraham is our father," they answered. "If you were Abraham's children," said Jesus, "then you would do the things that Abraham did. As it is, you are determined to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the things your own father does." "We're not illegitimate children," they protested. "The only father we have is God himself." So, here we have a group of people who have put their faith in Jesus, it says. Right at the end of the last section, we've had Jesus talk to them about his validity of his testimony. And at the end of that discussion, it says, even as he spoke, many put their faith in him. And that's not surprising, because we've seen that happen before, where Jesus' words are so overpowering and his character so mesmerizing. He has such a personality which is attractive to those on a spiritual level that many put their faith in him just in the sheer presence of him. It's unusual to see people with that kind of presence and magnetism and words, but you see it exemplified here in Jesus to the highest degree. And to the Jews who had believed in him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. And then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Now, this is worth dwelling upon. If you hold to my teaching, then you are really my disciples. What does it mean to hold to my teaching? Well, the idea of to hold is to hold on to something, to keep it to yourself, to not let go of it, to not allow it to disappear from you or wander off, but you keep it to yourself. And the idea of taking possession of something here, taking possession of my teaching, incorporating it into your own life, your own viewpoint, the things which guide you, your own moral compass. If you set your moral compass by the teachings that I give you, then, he says, you will be my disciples indeed. The implication here, the opposite, is that there are some people who assent to Christ in a kind of offhand kind of way. Yes, we're on your side, Jesus. Yes, we subscribe to what you say. Yes, you can count on us. But there's an impact here to be measured. There's an idea that it's not some simple assent. It's not some ticking of a box. It's something which needs to be incorporated and held on to in one's own life. And the way in which that manifests itself is by the way that you live, by the things that you do, by the very acts that you say, or the teachings that you produce yourself and hold on to, the words that you say for yourself. These are the things which show whether you hold on to the truths of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus. And so We've mentioned this before, but it becomes very important here that a mere mental assent, a mere agreement, a mere acquiescence in and a ticking of a box kind of approach, a legalism, is not what's required here. There's a heartfelt acceptance and holding on to this truth such that you orientate your life around it. Now, if you do that, says Jesus, then you are really my disciples. If you don't orientate your life around it and hold on to what I say, if it's just a temporary matter with you, then you're not my disciples, no matter what you say. So, the nature of faith is such, as we've seen explained maybe in James, that it works itself out in the way that you live. And that's the very nature of faith. Faith affects how you live. If you really believe something, you will live according to it. If you don't really believe it, no matter what you say about it, then you don't really believe it. So your actions, as the saying goes, speak louder than maybe your protestations and your allegiances. Actions are the key here to showing whether you really hold on to what I say. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Now there's an incredibly important statement, very powerful statement, that if you know the truth will set you free. And there are many examples of the way that works, but let's just take the phrase, you will know the truth. If you hold on to my teaching, you will know the truth. In other words, the words that I give you, they are true. Hold on to them fast. Believe what I say. What I'm telling you is the truth. If you hold on to the truth and follow that truth, it will set you free. It sets you free from all sorts of problems. It sets you free from errors. It sets you free from sins. It sets you free from mistakes. It sets you free from making the wrong course in life. There's all kinds of things which will perplex us, puzzle us, whether we hold on to things or not. Take, for example, let me give you some very trivial examples to how you can be free of things if you understand what Jesus says. Many people order their lives according to folk wisdom, superstitions. They believe that if they walk under a ladder, then they'll get many years bad luck. If they break a mirror, they'll get many years bad luck. These are superstitions which control people's actions and behavior. You have to act in a certain way. You can't walk under the ladder, you have to walk around it. You have to do certain things and throw salt over your shoulder and all this kind of stuff. But if you know the truth, then the truth sets you free from the bondage of that kind of behavior. No longer do you have to act in that kind of way, do those kind of things. Let's take another example. If you are someone who is controlled by the Pharisaical law, controlled by legalism, then, as the man was told, don't take up your mat and walk. Don't do this. At a certain hour, stop what you're doing. The law of the Sabbath requires you to be very careful about this or that or the other. But if you know the truth, then you're set free from legalism. You're set free from having to do the things which people bind upon you by their traditions and by their own personal ideas. If you understand what the truth is, then you no longer find that you're bound by certain things. Now, in particular, the thing that you are freed from here is the thing that Jesus himself is mentioning, because having explained that if you know the truth sets you free in so many ways, you're not caught up with superstition or tradition or anything else which will control your behavior and teach you to do various things in certain ways. If you understand the truth, if you can get to the heart of the matter, understand the reality of something, then all those extra little things which are just man-made ideas, they all fall to one side. You'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free. The truth always sets people free once you understand what the truth is. Once you understand the truth, it enables you to live in a free way. They answered him, "We're Abraham's descendants." There's a bit of pride here in that statement. The idea that we are Abraham's descendants. Abraham was a great man of faith, and who did the things of God, the favourite of God, who showed by his actions that he was someone who was close to God. We are Abraham's descendants, and we have never been slaves of anyone. Rather interesting, isn't it? A rather interesting statement here. Because, of course, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and so on down the line, they become the father of Jacob and Esau, and Jacob the father of Joseph and the other people, all taken off into Egypt and all becoming slaves at that time until Moses freed them from that slavery. So it's interesting to hear them say that we are Abraham's descendants and we have never been slaves of anyone. They can only have been speaking here personally, that we're not slaves of anyone. And that's an interesting statement even for them personally, because here they are in an occupied country. I suppose not technically slaves, because they can go about their daily business in an ordinary way, but nevertheless, the ruling authority is the authority of Rome, and they are bound to do what the Roman law tells them to do. Technically, though, they're not slaves. And so, having heard Jesus say, "If you know the truth will make you free," clearly they're offended by that idea of being made free, because they consider themselves as already being free. How can the truth set us free when we're already free, Jesus? How can that be the case? We're Abraham's descendants, we have a proud lineage, and we personally have never been slaves of anybody, so it's not going to make us any more free than you think it is. But what they're forgetting is that people are bound up in superstition and tradition and custom. They do things out of respect for what other people tell them to do, rather than out of respect for the truth. But once you know the truth sets you free from having to do all manner of crazy and foolish and superstitious things, all manner of things which are done only for ritual's sake or for tradition's sake. The truth sets you free from all that when you fully understand what the truth is, where reality lies, and then you can hold on to that. But Jesus says, "I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin." You know, they say they've never been slaves of anyone. How can you make us free? And yet, says Jesus, yes, you are slaves. You are slaves of sin. Everyone is a slave of sin. In other words, everyone does what sin commands them to do. Everyone is subject to the demands of sin. No one is free from that. Everyone is a slave of sin. I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. Now, it's interesting, it doesn't say everyone is a slave of sin, but everyone who sins is a slave of sin. Implication being that everyone falls into that category, and therefore everyone is a slave of sin. We saw that from the previous story of those who wouldn't cast any stones because they were not without sin. It's vital to understand, I would say, the connection between truth, if you understand it, releasing you from slavery to be free, and that slavery being the slavery to sin. So there's the direct connection between the statements that Jesus is making here. If you know the truth, then you will no longer be the slave of sin. Now that's a powerful and interesting statement. Does it mean that if we understand the truth, we will never sin anymore? That might be the surface interpretation, but it may not be the real interpretation of what we have here. He goes on to say, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. And if you're a slave to sin, then you have no permanent place in the family. Now, do you see how Jesus is now explaining how your position with respect to God is determined by your position as a slave to sin if you're in a household. So, truth will set you free. You are a slave to sin. The consequences of slavery are that you have no permanent place in the household. No permanent place in the household means you will die. You come and you go. You're here on a temporary basis. You are given life, and that life is lost through sin, lost through losing your connection with God. There's the link then. Truth, freedom from sin, and therefore becoming no longer a slave to sin, and the slavery itself impoverishing your position in the household of God. But if you know the truth, if you know me, if you understand my words, if you believe what I say, then I take you out from being a slave as a position in the household to being someone who is a son. If you are set free from that slavery, then you will be free indeed. The slave has no permanent place in the family. You have no permanent place in the family of God, is what he's saying. But the son has a permanent place in the family of God. The son is related to God the Father. The son is part of the family and can never be pushed out or sold on or moved off, because the son has a permanent place. He is related by genetic code and connection to the Father. Every son is related to the Father. And so he has a permanent place in the family. And the son belongs to the family forever, unlike you, who don't have a place in the family, but are a slave within that family, slave to sin. It's a very powerful illusion here that's being brought out. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And if the Son sets you free, that means you're set free no longer being a slave. That means no longer being someone who has no permanent place in the family, but someone who now can gain a permanent place in the family, because you're no longer this slave to sin. Slave to sin. And that's very, very significant then, because now we see the unraveling of the curse that sin brings. Sin makes you into a slave, because everyone who sins is a slave of sin. But by being released by Jesus Christ or set free, it's the same freedom that the truth will set you free. I deliver that truth, the light of the world. Listen to me. You will gain that freedom and therefore no longer be the slave of sin. And the contrast here has to be with the teaching of the Pharisees, who were, therefore, not only the slaves to sin, but teaching others to be enslaved to sin through their legalism, through their traditions, through their added on bits and pieces to the message of God, binding burdens upon men's backs that they couldn't even carry or lift a finger to help themselves, as was said in Matthew's Gospel. And so this is an entire package here which follows as night follows day. Believe in Jesus and hold on to his teachings. Jesus presents the truth. The truth, if you hold on to it and keep it, sets you free from being a slave to sin. That provides you with, takes away your temporary place in the household of God and endues you with a permanent place in the household of God, which Jesus Christ gives you as part of that connection which you have with him because you hold on to his truth. That's the idea which is being presented here. It's a complex idea of ideas, a complex set of ideas, which brings together the fatherhood of God, the sonship of Jesus Christ, and our fellow relationship with him, from which we become children of God rather than slaves to sin. That's the nature of the argument here. Now he says, I know you're Abraham's descendants, and yet, Abraham did the will of God. That's the key point about Abraham. Abraham, the man of faith. Faith marks out Abraham as being very special and unusual. He did what God wanted him to do regardless of the cost. I know you're Abraham's descendants. And by claiming descendancy from Abraham, you're claiming to have the characteristics of Abraham, that you also do the will of God. And yet, that can't be true because you are ready to kill me, because you have no room for my word. In other words, the things I'm teaching you, you don't accept them. They don't lodge within you. And as a consequence of that, you reject what I say, you reject me, you seek to kill me. And yet, what I'm telling you is the truth. It's the very words which I have seen in the Father's presence. Astonishing claim. It comes up again and again and again, and Jesus hammers this point home that I have been with the Father, I came down from the Father, and it's an echo back to John 1:1, which seems to echo throughout the entire Gospel here. The Word, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So I'm telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you do what you've heard from your Father. Wow, that is a powerful indictment when you understand what he means by that. My Father is God Almighty, the powerful God who I relate to as closely as a son to a father. And you do what you have heard from your father. Now, he's not referring to Abraham here. And they know it. Because the implication here is that my father is God, the Father, and your father is of the devil. But they claim, no, Abraham is our father, they answered. And Jesus replies that if you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, you would do the things that Abraham did. This is the characteristic that a father passes on to the son. This is why there is a close connection. The son looks like the father. The son picks up the idioms of the father. The son picks up the same language as the father. The son speaks in the same way as the father. The son learns everything he knows about life from the father. The connection is endemic and embedded within the characteristics of the son. That's how that is. And by extension, to say I am a child of Abraham or a descendant of Abraham, it means the characteristics of Abraham are in me. And what characterized Abraham was his faith in God. So much faith, in fact, that at whatever the cost, he would do what God said, even if it meant taking his own son Isaac and sacrificing him on an altar, even though Isaac was the thing which he loved the most. Never mind, I'll still do that. And Abraham has gone down in history as the man of supreme faith in God who would jettison everything to do what God commanded. Everything was expendable. And that's the kind of nature, the single-minded nature of Abraham here. And if you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, you would do the things that Abraham did. You would show that same faith. But, as it is, you are determined to kill me. This is quite evident, as it's been through the last few chapters, that Jesus has provoked such a storm that the Pharisees, the teachers of the law, are out to kill him. They have sent the temple guard to arrest him, and that didn't work. They've tried to capture him in different ways. He's always been able to evade them. But everyone knows they're out to kill him. A man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. In other words, you even have no reason to kill me. I've done nothing wrong. I've only told you the truth from God. Abraham did not do such things. And by consequence, you therefore do not have the characteristics of Abraham. And if you don't have the characteristics of Abraham, then you are not the children of Abraham. Yes, you might be the children by physical descent, but you're not the spiritual children of Abraham. You don't do the things that Abraham did. Yes, you might share some genetic code from Abraham along those lines, but you don't share the spiritual nature that Abraham had, nor his faith in God. You miss all those things out. You are doing the things that your own father does. Now, the implication here is that your own father is not God, but the devil. And that's a massive condemnation, which strikes them in the very heart. And they understand that exactly, as he says, we are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. And some people have thought that this is a reference to Jesus being born of the Virgin Mary and the scurrilous rumours that therefore he was illegitimate himself. I don't think that's the case here. There's no indication that this is what the background is. When they say we're not illegitimate children, I think it's a much simpler matter than that. Jesus has accused them of not being the children of Abraham because they don't have the characteristics of Abraham. And by saying that we're not illegitimate children, people who are born without the characteristics of the father, people who are born out of wedlock, people who are born without that birthright coming down to them, people who don't share in the blessings of that father. We're not illegitimate children. We are genuine children of Abraham and consequently of God rather than of the devil, as you're saying that we are. And so they repudiate Jesus' statement that he is the Son of God from the Father. They are the son of their father, the devil. They repudiate that, and they claim instead to be genuine children of Abraham. Not fake children of Abraham, as Jesus has charged them with. Fake in the sense that they don't carry the characteristics of Abraham. No, we are genuine children of Abraham, is what they're maintaining, whose ultimate goal means that God himself is our father, not the devil. That's where the challenge has been. And we'll go on in the next section to find out how Jesus addresses their repudiation.